At each table, you'll find the legislative agendas, should be all around there, that the committee and the chamber board approved. Next week, our Tallahassee team will be in the halls of the Capitol advocating these positions on behalf of your chamber and talking about these issues. So please familiarize yourself with these, and if you have any questions on these specific issues or others, it'll be good to ask during our Q&A later. I'll go through a couple of the highlights that we're going to be talking about. We're talking about, again, the phase out of the business rent tax, the manufacturing equipment sales tax, of course, economic development incentives for small business, and talking about the overall overhaul of Enterprise Florida. Obviously, we want additional funding for K-12 public schools and funding for the construction projects for those educational facilities. We also talk about infrastructure for transportation projects, as we all saw driving in here this morning, the importance of that. And last but not least, oh no, I'm sorry, that's it. That was our top four. I apologize. Yeah, exactly. Get that right done. Okay. Excellent, excellent. And we'll adjourn next Friday, and we'll all come back home. It'd be perfect. I love it. So without further ado, I'll introduce our first speaker, Senator Bill Galvano.
Thank you, Casey. I was telling him that's easy. We'll get that done next week. We'll come back here, have breakfast, play golf. First of all, thank you for having us. It's, for me personally, very nice to see all of you, see my good friends, people who have worked with me through this process through many years at this point, some new friends, and it's just good to be back in Manatee County. This year has been tremendous in terms of the task that we have endeavored to tackle collectively and frankly, personally. You know, I serve as Majority Leader in the Florida Senate. I also serve as the Chair of Reapportionment. And as you know, that has been a tremendous issue in the state of Florida because we are really, this House and our Senate presently, the test case for two new constitutional amendments that went on when in 2010 before the last census and before the last redrawing. And we're working our way through that, and I think we see the light at the end of the tunnel. We also ended up having an additional special session last year on the budget, as well as the two redistricting special sessions. And I think when I calculated it, it was 38 weeks of official legislative duty, and then you add to that the court litigation duty. I don't think I've been in this area much last year, not much more than maybe 9 or 10 weeks. But this year, I think it's going to be a little different. We are starting session early. It begins next Tuesday. Typically, we go into committee hearings during January and February and start vetting through bills. We've been doing a lot of that through the year and through the fall and this winter. So we will actually begin Tuesday. We have committees on Monday. We'll begin Tuesday and run through the first week of March. And that's typically when we would start session. So we'll open up the balance of the year for fundraising, campaigning, all those things that we typically do in the off season. And then next year the session will go into its regular schedule. We have a higher level of cooperation anticipated this year between the House and the Senate, as well as between the legislature and the executive branch. And next week, we are going to hit the ground running. We're going to tackle some very important issues and get them out that very first week. Issues including water policy, comprehensive water policy for the state of Florida, which is very important for our springs and for Everglades to make sure that we are planning together and not having overlap or hiatus where they shouldn't be. Increase access to public lands for Floridians and just to make sure that we are maintaining and protecting the quality of our environment, which is very apropos when I look out to my right. The other series of bills that you will see come off the Senate floor and off the House floor, I believe, as well next week, involve issues for persons with unique abilities, as we call it. And for me, this is very important. I mean, when I ran for office, and many of you were there very first time, I said I adhere to the Lincoln Rule, that the role of government is to do for those who can't do for themselves or do well for themselves. And that's a pretty simple rule. And besides the constitutional requirement of passing a budget, if you just apply that rule, it sort of narrows what the focus is and what the important issues are. And that includes your persons with unique abilities and your elderly, your mentally ill. But we'll have a series of bills including work opportunities, partnerships with business who create opportunities, financial literacy, job opportunities within the state system and the public sector as a whole. The other things you can look forward to, and then I'm going to sit down because I've, through the years, found we end up talking all the time. You don't get enough time to ask questions. But the other thing is education funding. It was mentioned by Casey, the importance of that. The reality is we've been giving more and more and more and more. This year you will see historic levels at the per student level, higher than ever before. So just expect that. With regard to tax cuts, maybe another $250 million in tax cuts, and I also support the commercial lease reduction in the manufacturing tax that you referenced. So look forward to a productive, cooperative session, and certainly we'll continue to work with each of you as you come up or reach out to us and do what we need to do to make sure that Manatee County is getting what it deserves from the legislative process. Thank you.
Good morning. I'm Jim Boyd. If you don't know me, I serve with these two gentlemen in Tallahassee on your behalf. And again, it's great to be here today and talk about what the issues that are important to our community. I kind of feel like the senator said, we've been in Tallahassee more this past year than we've been at home. So it is nice to get back. And the reason I told you my name was because sometimes we feel like we have to reintroduce ourselves, not only here, but at home as well. So it's been an interesting year, but I heard, and I believe Greg, my House colleague, heard as well, that we have agreement with the Senate on the key issues, right? So there shouldn't be any conflict as we get there this year. So we will count on that. Seriously, though, we do have a good relationship with the Senate. Last year, we had some differences of opinions on some things, but that's what democracy is all about. If we all went up there and did the same thing and said the same things and agreed to the same things over and over and over, what good would that be? So while it was a long year and a trying year for many, and certainly my friend the senator had a little more time invested than some of us in all the things he was working on, but it produced good outcomes, and it is producing good outcomes, and I think that's the way our forefathers meant for this all to work. Bill hit the key issues, I think, the first week that we'll be dealing with, talked about some of the overarching issues that will come after that. I do believe as well it's going to be a very productive year. I know and I count on the fact that we'll be home and out early so we can be at home in our communities, hopefully sometime in mid-March as well. As far as the House goes, we share the same priorities that are going to be taken up next week. They'll be going through both bodies, and I trust we'll be passing those out, and they'll be going to the governor after that. And then we'll get on with other important legislative and policy issues as we move forward throughout the rest of the session. A couple of things that we'll be working on as well. I know the senator mentioned tax cuts. We, too, in the House anticipate a fairly aggressive tax cut package. We don't have the details of that yet. The committee chair and his team are working on that. As you probably have read, and I know the Chamber's been asked to support the Governor's Enterprise Florida initiative. I've been asked to work on that in the House side along with the Governor's office and others, so I can't tell you that we're going to do exactly what you've been reading about perhaps in the papers, but there is some agreement, I believe, both in the House and the Senate to try to do something, and we're going to, to try to incent businesses to be here. It's had good success over the past years, as you've read, and we want to continue that momentum as we build Florida's economy. Unemployment finally is an all-time low for us, at least since we've been serving in the legislature. We were here 5 years ago or 6 years ago and talked about the $6 billion hole in the budget and the, double-digit unemployment, and everything was kind of on the rocks. So now, due to, I think, good conservative government and good conservative policy, we've been able to turn that around, and hopefully you and your businesses and your families are enjoying that as well. But I promise you, our goal is to try to limit government, stay out of your way, let you do what you do best, let your families do what they do best, keep as much money in your pocket as we can so you can spend it better than we think we can, and support education and some of the things that are very important to Florida. So I could ramble as well, but I won't, because you want to have time for questions. But it's a privilege to serve in Tallahassee on your behalf. I know, I was just telling Greg as we were sitting there, it sounds like everybody's coming up next week for whatever reason. So we'll see you next week. But in the meantime, those of you that can't come, or maybe your schedules won't allow, phone us, call us, email us if issues are imported or something's moving through that you don't understand or that you want more clarity on, or maybe you want some input in. Please let us know, because we are truly your voice in Tallahassee, and without us knowing what you want, what's important to you, it's hard for us to respond. So I look forward to questions in a little bit, but again, thank you for having us this morning. It's a great crowd. It's a great way to start the year, and thank you for your engagement and your involvement in the process. It's critical to us and for us to be successful there. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Casey, and thanks again for having us. It's always a privilege and honor to be here with you, both before and then after session, so we can report back of the things that we were working on up there. My colleagues have already hit kind of the highlights, so I'll talk about some of the committees I serve on, some of the things that I'll be working on, and actually that Representative Boyd and I will be working on. He's got a Bronze Star plate bill that we're going to be doing through one of my committees. I chair Highway and Waterway Safety, so anything to do with the highway or the waterway comes through my committee, and we do all the driver's license issues that you're going to hear. We're going to do a proposed committee bill in conjunction with Senator Brandis and his committee in the Senate on some driver's license issues, and we're going to do some of we already passed the Uber bill. You probably heard a lot about the ride share bill. That already passed our committee. I vice chair health quality, and I also sit on health innovation. So I'm your only member that sits on both of the healthcare subcommittees, and I've sat on a healthcare committee for all 6 years in my legislative time, one health committee or the other. So from a health policy perspective, I see all of the healthcare related policy bills, and then both Representative Boyd and I sit on the appropriations committee. So I also see the appropriations side of healthcare on the appropriations committee. I also sit on economic affairs and deals with a lot of the different, like the Enterprise Florida funding, the tax incentives and those kind of things also tend to go through economic affairs. One of the things that is on your sheet, that for the last 2 years, I have sponsored the commercial sales tax repeal. And you've probably heard me every time that we talk how that Florida is behind the 8 ball on this. We are the only state in the country that taxes commercial leases. There is one other municipality in the country that taxes it, and guess what it is? New York City. And I don't want to be compared to New York City. So I've filed it the last couple of years. I actually was happy to see that it was actually in the governor's proposal this year. You know, we don't know how much we're going to have on a tax cut and what we're going to be able to do, but I hope that's part of the calculus, and I hope that we can continue to repeal that tax over a period of years, because there's no reason why our small businesses should be really taxed twice, but taxed to lease space to operate their business. So I think it's a great thing for economic development. I think it's a great thing for small businesses and for jobs. I'm also working on, as I'm sure this is a big Manatee County issue, the patty bill, the dangerous dog bite bill. That's actually, hopefully, it hasn't been agended yet, but I'm hoping, the chairman told me that's going to be up next week, so that'll be the last committee in the House, and then it has already passed 1 or 2 committees in the Senate, so that bill should pass very quickly, and we amended it in the last committee so that it could become act upon law. So as soon as it passes the legislation and the governor signs it, it'll become law, versus most of our bills tend to become law July 1st. So those are some of the things that I'm working on. I also, last year, at the end of session, we talked about the veterans bill that unfortunately died because of the early convening of session. I have that bill again. I'm pushing that through the process. It's already passed, I think, 2 committees in the Senate. Senator Bean has it in the Senate. And hopefully we'll get that through the process this year to help our veterans. There's going to be a lot of things that are going to be kind of put into that. One of the challenges has been both getting the information of services available in our state and our community to veterans when they either return home or move here. And the other part of that is getting them the services that they need. And so hopefully we can get that done this year, because obviously being a veteran, this is something that's near and dear to my heart. And we, as legislators, I think we would all agree that we want Florida to be the best state in the country for veterans to live, work, and move back to. So I'll continue to shepherd that cause and fight for our veterans on that. And with that, I'm happy to answer your questions. Thanks.
Thank you all. If you want to ask a question, we have a microphone over here. Please go ahead and start with that, and I'll recognize you and repeat the question. Mary, there you are.
You only have to
You were
ask
one
once.
of the one of the committee members, so go ahead, Mary Ruiz.
Mary Ruiz with Centerstone, and I want to thank our legislators for all that you do for us and the sacrifices that your family have made, especially this year, for public service. You know, the Chamber supports increased funding for behavioral health because of its impact on the business environment. Senator Garcia has a major reform bill that he's been working on. Representative Harrell. Neither of those bills in their past incarnation included any increased funding for the state that has 49th out of 50. We don't want to be compared to that either, Representative Stubbe, of all the states in funding. And so I wonder what you feel the appetite is in the Senate and the House to make an investment in mental health. We've never caught up with the cuts that we had to make during the recession.
Thank you. Anyone want to take that?
Yeah, I'll tell you about the Senate. I can tell you what my appetite is. I think we need to increase the funding. And didn't we put all the Manatee Glens request in this week? I want very much for Senator Garcia's bill to pass. For me, it's a priority because it ties into everything, including the homeless issue here in Manatee County as well as throughout the state of Florida. So I'm going to advocate for it, and we'll see where we get.
Yeah, thank you, Mary. I would say echo the senator's comments, and I believe Representative Stubbe maybe put some of your requests in. I know I did as well, at least for the local community, and I believe Representative Pilon perhaps as well. So we're trying to do that component, but I would agree, you know, we need to step up funding. Unfortunately, everybody doesn't just do what we tell them to do up there. So
For yourself.
Well, true. He's a senator, folks. Yeah, thank God we have somebody up there that can help this community. Seriously, it is very important. It's a critical issue and a need for our state, and I do share your concern and how low we are in the stacking of the states in the funding. So we will work at it. I hope this year there is, as everybody knows, you know, the budgets and the revenues have been increasing a little bit. So with that is opportunity, but with that also is a lot of people wanting their part of it. So. We'll work hard, and I know I will, and I believe all my colleagues in the House kind of share the same thoughts.
Yeah, my wife doesn't even do what I ask her to do, so to get other members to do what I ask is a challenge. But I put in $500,000 last year. It got in the budget for, I keep wanting to say Manatee Glen, Centerstone. Unfortunately, it got vetoed. I met with Judge Quartermain yesterday on the exact bill that you just described. I'm happy to co-sponsor that. And I'm also going to put in, the court system is trying to put together a funding mechanism for mental health crisis intervention, working with your organization, Centerstone, but to have some judicial remedies. And, being a lawyer, and Senator Galvano can talk about this too, and it was I think it was in the paper, in the Sarasota Herald Tribune today on the front page, it's just a revolving door. You have people that have mental illnesses that are committing misdemeanors, but they're not really competent enough to even stand trial for the misdemeanors. And Judge Quartermain was explaining this to me yesterday. They just have to let them go. So these people, I'll tell you the story she told me yesterday. She said that this individual was so dangerous that they did not want to bring this individual to the courtroom. So he was too dangerous to bring to the courtroom because of his mental health issues. They just released him. And so you're putting that individual right back into the community where he's going to go and do what? Commit another crime, which isn't a felony. It's typically a misdemeanor because they're walking around the streets and they don't have anywhere to go. Most of them are homeless. And then they just get rearrested, and then they go through the same process, and then they're deemed incompetent or not mentally able to stand trial, and then they get released again. So she's saying that 2/3 of these people, 2/3 of their time, they're in jail. And the jails aren't giving them the mental health that they need. So She asked for, it's just around $1 million of recurring dollars that I gave her the information yesterday. I'm going to submit that as a budget request. I know there's a lot of budget requests in Tallahassee. Okay, so now you got a senator that's going to do it too. So you got a House and a Senate member that's going to put that in. And I really think that would, the plan that she put in place that had been signed by everybody, the court system, the public defender, the state attorney, as getting us to where we need to be on that issue. Hopefully we can get that funded, and maybe we can really address that issue. And I think it's a shame that the state of Florida is 49th out of 50 states in mental health funding, because it affects not just people with mental health disorders, but law enforcement. Because with Judge Quartermain that came in yesterday, Captain Stiff from the Sarasota Police Department, I thought that was an interesting name for a police officer, Captain Stiff. But that was actually his name. I said, all right, Captain Stiff. He said that I spend 2/3 of my day, every day, dealing with homeless mental health issues. I'm not out roaming the streets looking for people burglarizing businesses and houses. I'm dealing with the homeless because the businesses call and say, hey, we get this guy standing out front. He's, whatever he's doing, you need to come pick him up. And then they take him to the hospital with hospitals full, or you're full because you're at capacity and there's nowhere to put these guys. So they arrest them, and then we go through the thing that I just explained. So I'm happy to advocate whatever you need from me on this. I'm happy to support it 100%. And I hope this year with the additional funding, we're able to do that.
Did you get your question answered, Mary? Okay, great. 2 thumbs up. Any other questions? Yeah. Go ahead, ma'am. While you're walking up, I'll take kind of a chair's privilege here and ask, I see Dr. Propsfeld in the room and other education folks, school board members. Anybody want to tackle, you mentioned it a little bit, Senator, about school funding. You want to talk anything about that from the Senate position, or that you didn't already cover?
Yeah, I mean, we're going to...
Sorry.
The idea is to have historic levels of funding through K-12, and I know in our college and university system there are requests as well. We're going into a Senator Negron presidency who's valued the university system. That's a goal for him, to get us into a position to compete at that level with other states. Obviously, in the college system has been something that is very important to me. I prioritized it when I chaired education appropriations, and so, just look forward to it being a priority issue and something that we're going to focus on all the way through. So that's where we are. And yeah, I have one more comment to Mary Ruiz's question. Another hook for the increase in mental health funding is this whole violence issue. I mean, we watched the president, maybe most of you did, last night on CNN and his desire to increase funding on gun regulation, but there's a bigger equation out there. Mental health is a gigantic part of that equation, and unfortunate for those incidents to have occurred, but perhaps that will awaken all of us, including some of our colleagues, to the necessity for focusing on mental health funding.
I could just jump back real quick to the education piece. The other thing that I know the Senate and Senator Galvano's leadership has been critical there, and the House worked on last year and prior years, and we'll try again this year, some of the facilities funding for our good colleges and universities. So that's important. I know all of you in the room have needs. One in particular that disappointed me last year was the resource center at the State College of Florida. We thought we had it positioned to get across the finish line, and unfortunately, at the end of the day, that didn't happen. So those are some of the issues that we'll be going at again this year. And obviously, there's a finite amount of funds, but we're going to do our best to get what we think is appropriate for our community. And between the senator's leadership in his chamber and our friend Chairman Fresen, who's the Education Appropriations Chair, again, I think we've got some good allies to try to help us. But again, we'll be fighting hard for that.
Go ahead, ma'am. You say your name and organization, please.
My name is Barbara Anson of Barbara Anson Realty in Maca City, Florida. There's a few of us out here from Maca City, and I don't know if any of you have been past the interstate, but the traffic on Highway 70 is bad. So this is for Representative Stubbe. What are we going to do about Highway 70? I have to send 15 minutes to get out of my driveway, and that's way out you know where.
I do know where, actually. I've been out that way quite a bit. And it's funny you said that because we live in East Sarasota County, and I usually get off at university to come here, and my wife and I were talking, and I totally lost track of where I was at, and I ended up at 70, and I saw the light at Caruso change 4 times before I got through. So it's a big issue. Last year, with Senator Galvano's help, we were able to get the funding for I-75 and University, and I'm happy to report that that is on track and moving forward, and every day I drive through that corridor, and it looks different. They're doing so much work. So I'm happy to look at that issue and try to see what DOT can do on 70. I know east of the interstate, it's not as, I don't think it's as bad as where I just turned on.
Yes,
So
it is.
we'll do I'll ask DOT to do, what typically happens, they have to do a traffic study. And then, so get with me afterwards, and I'm happy to address that on that issue, because we were able to get the I-75 done last year, and hopefully that'll ease some of the traffic concerns.
Sherry?
Hi, I'm Sherry Corrier, the Director of Neighborhood Services with the county, but I'm here to talk about the Affordable Housing Program. What I want to mention is your participation in this subject will help the entire state of Florida, not just the local area, but for Sarasota and Manatee, if you could pay close attention to making sure that the full funds for the Sadowski Act, the State Housing Initiative Partnership Act are there so that your local area can work with the market. It's not only helping the affordable and workforce housing issue, but also the private sector. And I think some of the subjects you heard, mental health and the traffic, if we can get some urban core incentives so that we can do housing there, is going to alleviate a lot of the problems. So we're looking for your support. The County Commission is having 3 consecutive work sessions, one on January the 19th, one February and March. Well, we'll have the dates for that, and it's focused on all things housing in Manatee County, so we'll be providing that information to you as well. But there is funding available. We just need to get it back.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Anyone comment on this? Okay. Thank you for that. Yeah, Jim?
Jim Tollerton, Professional Benefits and Ringling Museum Board. Representative Boyd, how is it that you achieve such an incredible level of accomplishment? Oh, that's Austin's question. I'm sorry. On a more serious note, both the representatives, the question is, Insurance Commissioner McCarty resigned yesterday or the day before.
Right.
Everybody in this room is affected by health care costs, and it's kind of gone under the radar a little bit lately. What can we look forward to in the legislature that might help mitigate some of the cost increases of insurance premiums and insurance costs to health care providers?
Representative Boyd?
Well, I'll take an initial stab at it, and I'll pay you later for that question. Thank you, Jim. That was very, very nice. And Representative Stubbe may want to weigh in as well, because he, as he said earlier, sits on some healthcare committees. There are a variety of initiatives this year that our colleagues are trying to embark upon in terms of access and transparency and cost and different things that hopefully will allow more people, more services, and at a rate that's commensurate with the service that is available. I'm not up here to rail on what we've done, but by all standards, as you know, we're in the insurance business as well. I think Obamacare has done nothing but increase cost and limit access. And I've had just random people, even this past week, tell me, one of my buddies whose kids are grown, he lives at home, just he and his wife, and he buys his own health care. He pays like $24,000 a year for he and his wife, and they're both healthy, athletic kind of family, a couple. They're a little bit younger than I am. And he has a $10,000 deductible, and he buys it through the exchange. So I think that's anything but affordable, certainly in his case. So I think there's a lot of things that we should do and we can do. It's a complicated issue because of all of the interaction with the federal government on things. But in terms of Commissioner McCarty, I think that there'll be a vetting process in terms of selection, or a replacement for him. The chief financial officer will probably be leading that charge, and I believe the governor has to agree on the appointment. So I've heard a couple of names, which are just kind of random names that have been surfaced, but I know they'll be embarking on that pretty quick, because that's a big job that somebody needs to fill, and they've got a good team and a good staff and interim directors in the meantime. So it's not they're going to miss a beat, but I know they'll be looking hard to try to fill that. And then more specifically, I don't know if Representative Stube wants to, or Senator Galvano, but kind of a big picture, that's some of the things we're working on with healthcare.
You know, so many of the challenges with healthcare is the interplay between the feds and the state, and so much of it is driven from the federal government and what Congress does or doesn't do most of the time. And I know Speaker Ryan at the federal level has really tried to push his healthcare folks to come up with some solutions to the alternative to Obamacare. At the state level, several years ago, we had a plan that wouldn't expand Medicaid, but would put the people on an exchange type rate. So it would capture those people between 130 and 136% of the federal poverty level, which would be the same class of people that would be captured by Medicaid expansion if the state were to expand Medicaid. But instead of putting them on Medicaid, it would put them on a real health insurance plan that they pay $25 a month for. When Speaker Weatherford was Speaker, that was one of the plans that we pushed through the House. And that's going to be a big issue that the House and the Senate are going to have to try to see what we can do from a state level. But the challenge is a lot of it depends on what the feds do. But I personally think it's better to put people on a real health insurance policy than to put them on Medicaid because, one, they're getting better health care outcomes. I mean, if you look at the outcomes being on Blue Cross Blue Shield versus being on Medicaid, it's a drastic difference. Two, if you talk to the hospitals, I'm sure there's somebody in here from the hospital, would you rather have a Medicaid patient or would you rather have a Blue Cross Blue Shield patient? I'm sure they would tell you they would rather have the Blue Cross Blue Shield patient. So there's a lot of advantages to that. And I think we shouldn't be giving something to someone for nothing. And by putting people on the exchange and having them pay $25 a month for a really good health insurance policy, I think they'll gain a lot of respect for what they are paying for at a very, very low cost. So those are some of the things that we've worked on, but it's a very big macro issue depending on what the feds are doing.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Sarah Hand with Spark Growth. With everybody wanting to have some of the budget and tax cuts and how those things all weigh out, I know Representative Stube has talked about public-private partnerships. What are you seeing in Tallahassee for public-private partnerships, impact investing, and innovation in how government looks at funding things?
Thank you.
I honestly think that's the way of the future. I think both, and we have some university folks here too, for the last 3 or 4 years I've worked on P3s. I created the legislation that is now in statute for public-private partnerships. That legislation created a task force that the governor appointed to come back to the legislature with recommendations. They did that last year. I have another P3 bill this year that encapsulates what the task force recommendations were into a bill and worked hand in hand with the universities and the colleges on it. Because really, the PICO funds, as Senator Galvano, when he was chair of education appropriations, will tell you, has drastically decreased, and there's just not enough money in the budget to be able to fund the infrastructure needs in our colleges and universities. I'm just using that as an example. P3s are the way to be able to fund those type of things and be able to get the infrastructure needs now, and the taxpayers aren't paying for most of it because it's on a fee, typically a fee-based system. So if the city of Sarasota wants to build a new parking garage, they find an investor or developer under a P3 model to invest in the parking garage, and then they do a comprehensive agreement over a period of 20 to 30 years, and that investor gets paid back through the fees that you pay to go into the parking garage. You, taxpayers in Sarasota or Manatee County, aren't paying for the infrastructure, but you're getting the infrastructure, you're creating jobs, and you're doing it at not the cost of the taxpayer, but the investor who's going to get paid over a period of time. I think you're going to see the $3 billion port tunnel in Miami was built with a P3. There's talk about doing a high-speed or some type of commuter rail between Miami, Tampa, and Orlando, Miami, Orlando, Tampa, using a P3 model. I had the opportunity to speak to the Canadian P3 conference. They had me come up and speak about P3s and what we were doing in Florida. And I think you will see a wave of roads, bridges, college and universities, buildings that you can use a P3 model for. The rest of the world is really ahead of us in this area. Spain, Canada, they use a lot of P3s to build infrastructure projects. The United States is kind of behind, but Florida, because of our work in this area, Florida and Texas is really starting to understand we can really utilize these to be able to do things both at the local level and at the statewide level. So I think you'll see an increase for any type of project that there would be an investment or a developer interested in doing the project in cohesion with a public entity, whatever that is.
We have, and you're going to see more and more of that. The reality is it began really 10 years ago, and Representative Glorioso was one of the first people to really start pushing these in the transportation world. And then when we went in and created our transportation authority, that was going to be one of the key funding components. I'm very excited about the idea that we're moving beyond just transportation and into different areas. And so to echo what Representative Stubbe said, you're going to see more and more of that supported by the Senate as well.
Jim, you want to comment on that? No. Okay. Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, good morning. I'm Linda Formella with the Realtor Association of Sarasota and Manatee. And I want to thank you first for your continued support of the funding of the Sadowski Affordable Housing Act, and hope that that will be fully funded this year. We recognize as realtors the struggle people have every day to find housing that's actually affordable for them. And so we continue to ask for your support on that. Also, the cut in the business tax is very important. We're dealing with business people who are trying to move here and make the decision between here and other states, so thank you for that continued effort. And I also want to ask about your efforts. I think they were started last year to limit the fees that homeowners associations and condo associations can charge for estoppel letters, and the way that those are handled and how long they're good for, and how those affect our closings.
Okay, so I think we talked about Sadowski and, so you want to talk about homeowner associations? Yeah, okay.
Yeah, that was Representative Wood's bill from last year, and we had talked about, me being involved in amending that. I'm pretty sure that he's filing again from the conversations that I've had with the realtors. So I'm happy to help move that through the process. I practice real estate law. We represent a ton of HOAs and condos and understand some of the intricacies that can happen there and some of the challenges that the realtors face. So I think you'll see that bill move. I don't know who has it in the Senate, but Wood has championed that for the last couple of years, and I'm happy to work with him on that.
Thank you.
Yeah, I just have just a quick comment, because your question sort of gets at the heart of what our challenge is. On the one hand, you want to make sure we're fully funding the Sadowski funds. And on the other hand, you fully support our tax cut. So you have to realize that's our challenge. We have to balance our budget every year and balance it in a responsible way, not incur debt, put money aside for emergencies, rainy days, things of that nature. So certainly while we're all going to say, yes, we support these initiatives, and yes, we support the tax cuts, come see us in mid-February when we're making the choice between how far we reduce the commercial lease tax, and in order not to impact mental health program or the affordable housing program, or to clean up State Road 70, or to entice a business into Florida, or to be able to be a real partner with a private entity. So all good stuff, but understand that's what we're doing.
Thank you, Linda. Hey, go ahead, Ms.
Good morning. My name is Misty Servia. I am a candidate for District 3, Manatee County School Board. And my question is about PICO funds. I'm very happy that you all are so interested in helping with education funding. And I asked, would you please consider making sure that traditional K-12 schools are eligible for the PICO funds from the state of Florida? And do you have any comments on that?
You want to talk any more about that?
Yes, very important. We went through an economic downturn. The traditional model that created the PICO dollars just wasn't cutting it in terms of the need. And so for the last few years, we've gone into general revenue and supplemented PICO with general revenue in order to be able to hit projects further down the list. So it's not lost on anyone, the importance of these projects, and we're going to have to continue to look at the funding mechanism itself, because it hurts still when we take GR and put it into PICO, because those are dollars that could go elsewhere. But it's not that anyone doesn't share that desire.
Thank you.
Good morning. Tom Waters, President, Easter Seal, Southwest Florida. I just want to take a minute and thank each of the delegation. I've had a chance to talk with each of you individually, and to hear us start off, I heard it at Kiwanis a week or two ago. I've heard it this morning. The emphasis on supporting people with unique abilities. I get a chance to work with those hundreds of families every day, and they don't get to be here today because they're busy doing exactly that, supporting those individuals with unique abilities. And so the opportunities that we're looking at providing next week and all those different things, critical. Thank you to the community that rallies around and supports the Easter Seals, the Goodwills, the community havens. We work together every day, so it's a private-public partnership. So thank you. But what I wanted to also share is early intervention and what's coming down the road. And I know many of you know it, and I've shared it with our delegation. But if you take a look at the statistics, 1 of 68 children diagnosed on the autism spectrum. The kinds of things we can do from 6 weeks to 5 years old is huge in mitigating future challenges. The studies tell us for every dollar spent, we'll save $8.60 in future costs. Never mind the math. Never mind, think of the individuals who start out at 1 and 2 years old with maybe becoming an adult with autism and being part of the 80% who are unemployed. Or think of that little guy or that little girl with autism who comes to a center like Easter Seals or the others and leaves kindergarten ready and is a leader and is working within the system. So those kinds of things are huge. So when you hear early intervention and early steps and those kinds of funding too, what we're doing for unique abilities is huge. Thank you. Long way to go. I get to visit. I'll be one of those that gets to come up next week and say hello. But we can't do it unless we do it together as a community. So, I had a chance to thank the sheriff earlier for the good things they do to keep our area protected for a very vulnerable population. I just couldn't resist the 2 minutes to say thank you and encourage you, if there's anything we can do to make it easier for you to share that, to get you more information, please let us know, because we're here to do that. And again, thank you for your leadership.
Thanks, Tom. Senator?
Morning, gentlemen. I don't need the money.
I think
Okay.
the vote. I
don't
think
need your
the
money.
vote was unanimous. Sir,
However,
that
here's
you
what-
don't have the floor.
Here's what we do. There you go. I got to watch myself. But Senate Bill 702, which is sitting in Senator Richter's committee waiting to be agended, which I will be on, and I would ask your help, Mr. Galvano, concerns domestic violence. Okay, we have a problem of women who are afraid to register to vote because their information of their current address is public information. And we've had cases where people are finding their exes or finding the person that they battered because they're able to gather that information from my office. And so we have 702 that we would ask you to support. I don't know where it's at in the House. I don't know who's actually got that bill, but I would like that. But in addition to that, we're going to ask Senator Richter to modify that to also protect email addresses, because right now we're getting more and more candidates who have recognized they can contact my office, and I must release back to them everybody's email address. And I don't believe that people, when they send me something by email, expect their email to be released to the public. So I would ask your support on those two issues, and it doesn't cost you a dime. I realize the newspaper is not going to like the fact that you're going to take some people out there and protect their names. Anytime you get into the sunshine, it's an issue. But for those two issues, I think for domestic violence, we're denying these people an opportunity to vote because they're scared. And I think for their email addresses, I think people have a right to privacy. Thanks.
Thank you. You want to comment? Yeah.
Yes. And Senator Bennett, you don't need me to lobby Senator Richter. That's his buddy. So, I'm sitting here and I see Ron Reagan out there, Senator Bennett, and for the old days. You guys should come up. Certainly I'll follow up with Senator Richter on it, and that type of sunshine exception is not unprecedented. Sheriff, as you know, we do it for law enforcement, judges, and now first responders in general.
I would just add, when I saw Senator Bennett grab the mic, everybody up here gets nervous because you never know. But I know Representative Stubbe and I both made notes. We'll check on the House side. As you well know, Speaker Reagan knows The First Amendment Foundation weighs in on everything and tries to make everybody's life miserable when we're just trying to do good public policy. These are things that are good public policy that protect our constituents. So I'll certainly be as supportive as I can, Senator Bennett, and I know we'll check on it when we get back and see if there's a House companion and what we can do to move it along.
Any others? Well, we have about 15 minutes left, but again, just want to thank Bright House Networks for their continued support, our legislative delegation. Thank you for all you do and what your families do to sacrifice you being gone. And also, thank IMG Academy for the great breakfast this morning. Why don't we give them a round of applause? Last but not least, I want to thank the chamber staff and the chamber commandos, Michael and Lisa and everyone who's going to be going up next week. Thank you for all you do for us to make us look good. And if there are no other questions, have a great day.